Hello, hello. What's up, everybody out there on the static plane? This is your friend John the Morgile um, here on the Morgile. So I know y'all are just now piling it in, so I'll give a few minutes for everyone to sort of, give everybody a chance to log in and get settled so that I don't have to say everything twice, although I probably wouldn't anyway, but hey. Hope everyone's looking forward to a great and relaxing and non-productive weekend. And unless you work on the weekends, then that sucks. um, and one thing that I wanted to touch on today is, we're all pretty well familiar with the ignorance involved with NASA and the heliocentric model. Arrogance and overall totally illogical and overall incorrectness, which is rewarded and reinforced using herd mentality. Don't you know anything about science? Science has proven the world is a spinning sphere, so there's no use looking at other models. That's a waste of time. I've often commented that stance is the opposite of science, as science should be, an inquiry towards figuring out the truth using tests and hypothesis and predictions, and ultimately using the scientific method and using, your discernment. And don't let our opinions and our theories get involved or get in the way of the truth. And I think that that's sort of been a big problem for all of us for our whole lives. But the truth is, you'll see a similar sort of professional courtesy or lack thereof, and even lack of discussion, often never occurs on this topic until said specialist professionals realize they're not that professional, courteous, or special in many cases, not saying all. But we see this sort of arrogance and disconnection from truth, and just mainly worried about getting their funding increase every year. We see this in NASA, CERN, and really any sort of theoretical astrophysics. They're all dishing out falsehoods to perpetuate this paradigm we've been discussing, the past year or two in most cases. So that's something that, I know that's sort of an abstract topic, but I guess the point to all this is this sort of system-wide ignorance and arrogance isn't just limited to NASA or the theoretical physics. It can also seemingly be applied to the medical, industry, the Food and Drug Administration, or even, just going to see your local hospital system is often a bureaucratic joke. And, I think that it's very scary to put our healthcare, in the hands of people who are just trying to make profit on what they're doing. I think that's ridiculous. I don't think things like healthcare should be capitalized. The prison systems, I don't think things like that should be, well funded and capitalized in a sense. They're there to make profit. They're there to earn capital, and they always have this responsibility to earn more next year than they did last year. It's just sort of the good corporate responsibility, I guess you could say. But yeah, it's not just limited to NASA and CERN and other sciences, but, you even go look back through history. We see things being changed to, alter the narrative and sort of sway people's overall opinions on facts or historical accounts. We see it all the time. And so, history needs to be questioned again. People argue that, religions need to be questioned again. Just going on this same principle that if most of these, academic beacons of, so-called truth and correctness turn out to be just, simply mind washed or, subliminally or forcibly programmed people who have been rewarded their whole lives for adhering to the, bizarre and often preposterous models of their, whatever their genre of specialty is. So, of course, if you're talking to a theoretical astrophysicist about, who specializes in binary cluster systems, then he's going to have, his own little special area of work And he may have different outlooks on things than even a similar, you know, a similar scientist. But if they're working in different spectrums, then they often compete with each other as opposed to share their information and try to work together. But anyway, sort of digressing, you could say this about any sort of agency that takes profit as their main concern, as opposed to fulfilling their mission objectives as a concern. And I guess NASA figured out long before any of the other ones, they figured out as long as they can convince the people that they have achieved whatever their goals are, whether that's going to the moon or sending Wally to Mars or whatever, tricking us into believing that it occurred is just as powerful to the minds of the American and people and to the world. It's just as powerful to convince people that we have XYZ technology than it is to actually develop and produce XYZ technology and then demonstrate it on a whatever scale. So this could apply to things like nuclear weapons. If you haven't looked into that, that's fairly important. Another example, I think nuclear weapons probably don't exist in a sense that we think that they do. There's good evidence to support this, but again, you've got this huge sort of tax tick. Oh, and I guess we can get into ticks a little bit later. But it's you have all these essentially tax ticks on our backs that prevent us from doing some really cool things. I mean, could you imagine if we spent, just a fraction of, just took back NASA's budget, and this will never happen, but let's just say we could take back NASA's budget for the last 50 years and get all our money back, and similar wasteful programs, that we've spent billions and billions of dollars on for nothing except for more expensive, more governments. If we could just take all that money back and apply it to actual exploration of the Earth, and there's a lot to explore out there, especially the deep oceans, what's beyond the southern region. There's lots of really interesting, I guess you could say, Easter eggs to be found here on Earth. But instead, we think for some reason that we're going to go become experts on some planet that we can barely get to, as opposed to really giving our own planet the full scrutiny that it deserves. So hopefully I'm making some sense here. So far, I haven't had any guests join me. I know they will. So I can either, because I do have some topics, but I wanted to talk about it with some guests. That would be great. I do have queued up Newton's Principia, so we could have a fairly lengthy look at the definitions, at least. We could probably get through the definitions in a couple hours. Or I've got a video that I sort of put together the narration for and actually recorded that. I just never went through and edited it and rendered it. And so maybe if you guys could show a couple comments on whether you'd rather me do the whole Principia thing, which is sort of like having a root canal, or I can read off of something that I did a couple months ago, and I just never got it into video format. But not to jump the gun here, we're only 10 minutes into the show, and typically everybody usually arrives about 20 minutes late. So I'll give everybody some time on that. And I guess, since we probably got a couple minutes, I can give you guys a quick look or a quick hear into this sort of video concept that I had worked on. I worked a great deal on it and just never got around to, to finishing it up, rendering it, and putting it in video format. And I probably will still do that. But not today. So you guys will have sort of the sneak preview on some of my thoughts that have not made it to video yet. So hooray, should be fun. Okay. I'm working solo here, so forgive me for any down times. Bear with me, everyone. I'm having your typical, there we go. I am still here. I'm waiting for my computer to load. There we are. So this was something that let's see. It's where's my pages window? That should be easier. Yeah, here we go. It's only 3 or 4 pages, but it's pretty thick pages. So, oh, and let me just go check if I can possibly find the live streaming on this. It says I'm still offline. Yeah, here we go. So 41 of y'all watching. Well, thank you guys so much for sticking in with me as I sit here and bumble around trying to figure out what I'm going to read. I'm going into the show now just to see if anybody had any preferences in terms of the fake shootings. Honestly, I haven't even gotten a chance to look into that. So maybe on the Principia. Okay, so maybe I heard one for Principia and one for shootings. Oh, just like the fake shootings. Maybe I'm reading into that. If so, okay. The Americans, I watched that. Well, okay, so yeah, the title of this is sort of a tentative working title. It's just Murdering the Americans. And you'll sort of get a reason why I'm named it that. But it's just sort of interesting stuff, interesting way to look at history. And I think history is definitely intermingled with the whole flat earth conspiracy because you've got historical figures apparently being very wily and crafty to really get their model, the heliocentric model, into fleshing it out and getting it into being widely accepted and widely, believed to be proven mathematically. So that sort of thing is important. Of course, date modified. Here we go. Okay. So I opened the wrong one. This is the right one. And maybe this one is a little bit longer than 3 pages. Okay. So, Murder the Americans. I hope you're all having a relevant and rich awakening to the sense that something isn't right with the world, especially from an average American perspective. If not, then you need to wake up immediately. Don't worry, I promise not to lead you astray into paranoid, schizoid, dark net land with no escape. I hope to be the one to throw you a rope for an answer to the questions that have been confounding us all. We Americans are sort of an odd, unpredictable bunch. We're taught how to do basically fuck all in the federal school systems. We send our children to the equivalent of federal prison for children, 40 hours a week, where they're essentially programmed to take orders from a superior, and all to feed the machine, the very machine that gnaws at our blood, flesh, and bone constantly from cradle to grave. We also spoon feed our children a version of reality which is totally false and indeed the very opposite of truth in these federal prisons for children, which is really what the federal schooling systems always felt like to me, or at least after I had been to jail, I was like, this kind of reminds me of school. Well, I guess because it's the same company, the same Fortune 1 company that is behind all of these sort of government projects. It's not like we're dealing with a huge, diverse group of people at the top, tippy top. So anyway, we Americans are a diverse bunch. In fact, I'd put down a terrific heap of coin that pound for pound, America has the most diverse population of any country. All of us are immigrants unless you're a Native American. Many of the Native Americans tribes are very hard to find. They've got them on reservations and not exactly the promises that we gave to them after they really helped Spanish and European explorers survive a very, very hard winter over there, which they shouldn't have done. But they did the right thing and they paid dearly for it. Oh, well, that's the cost of improving the world. That's the cost of capitalism is, we got to go and butcher some group of people, to get their stuff, or, what are we going to do? Right. So yeah, never any attempt for nonviolent political solutions, right? Because it's just so much easier to kill a dude and take his wife and daughter as a slave, which is the sort of thing that Columbus would do. that's one way to take care of your problem. But I don't think that's the correct way. I think that's a terrible way to handle a problem personally. So we silly Americans, not Native Americans, but we still call them Indians, or many of us do, still call them Indians. For over 500 years, because of the blundering fool, Christopher Columbus, I'll just call him CC from this point forward. See, up to this point in the late 1400s, America was unknown to the mighty kingdoms scattered across the world. In fact, many of the said mighty kingdoms didn't know one another existed in a lot of cases, nor did they have an accurate grasp of the true size of the world, nor what laid within it. Columbus was trying to find a shortcut to the eastern ports of Japan from France or from basically Europe. So when Columbus arrived here in the Bahamas, he thought he was way over there in Japan. Now, I should just point out that we should be damning and ridiculing, even despising CC for the way he allegedly treated the natives, which was to, like I said, murder the men and rape the women. And on the second trip, which that's where they did most of that, with a bunch of his beer-bellied friends, I would say thousands of them. And pretty soon after this, initial colonization of Spain and, down in Florida, these mighty kingdoms of old in the world got fresh to the jig. So ships started coming from France, Spain, England, all over Europe, wanted either a piece of this pie or, for the common average person, it was just to get the hell out of their inferior positions and crazy conditions, involved with, living in a feudalist or royal system or a caste system, if you will. Now, church and state held the masses of people up to their lips in water so the Royal Highness can get, on top of all of our heads and, float about 30 feet above the level. Can you imagine everything you see daily was nothing but trees? And this all started about 500 years ago. And we did a fine job piling up the bodies of natives from coast to coast like a well-oiled machine. You got to hand it to them. They did pretty good. But of course, it was all done through subterfuge, bogus deals that were never intended to be kept on our side, and essentially just pushed any Native American resistance into the smallest area possible, essentially, rendering impotent that group's ability to really survive in the ways that the Native Americans traditionally have. I haven't done too much research or research into the different, Native American tribes and types of tribes and what each tribe, believed and what they represent and their lifestyles. There's some pretty decent, I guess you could say, information on that topic, but there really was a diverse group of people here, and they all seem to have, similar languages and moral values. They all had their own, each little tribe or region had their own personal way of seeing things, seeing the universe, seeing ourselves. Can you imagine, though, that everything you see daily was nothing but trees? And this all started about 500 years ago. We did a fine job piling up the bodies of natives from coast to coast like a well-oiled machine, but this was just round one of the fantastic game, Murder the Americans. Round two's not going to be quite the same either. Okay. So, once that pesky business with the natives was complete, it was time to start drawing out tracts of land for the queen. But wait a minute, most of the people who live here now, even the immigrants, not even talking about the Native Americans, most of these people hate the effing queen. That's why they left everything they owned to desperately flee their lives for a long shot, really a Hail Mary, a wing and a prayer, And they did this because they wanted to get away from the living and cultural situations or systems that they had been so oppressed by for their entire lives in most cases. So the kings and queens had to be slick. They set up their stooge men to ensure they get dibs on the property and everything in it. There's 500 years and some change to account for in reality. You probably don't know of the Articles of Confederation, unless you watch my last video, then you do. But under the Articles of Confederation, under which we have had 7 presidents prior to Washington that most people have never even heard of. Now, they'll tell you that their boy George was first to cover up what they did. For expedience, we'll just assume that Benjamin Franklin was a shill, and that means, you know, he was going back and forth to the different crowns, the different royals, and ultimately, you know, behaving as sort of a double or triple agent of sorts. So while we're led to believe as young children that the dudes on the money were the greatest dudes ever, it doesn't seem that's actually the case in reality. Now, they'll also tell you that Boy George was the first founding fathers. Benjamin Franklin was a great guy. And yes, these dudes on that green paper you and I used to have, it was called money. Does that ring a bell to anyone? I don't know. Now, throughout history, if you look back at history and you look back at these political figures or these, I guess you could say archetypal or just possibly, the founding fathers, the highly revered men in our history. When you actually look at the type of people that they were, it just seems like they were not the people that we've been taught. And I'll just come out and say it right here. My theory is that the not so good guys or possibly the evil forces have won many of the past wars that we celebrate as victories, even though, we would have done a whole lot better if those victories would have been losses. For example, the Revolutionary War and, of course, the Civil War here in the U.S. These multi-generational families like to fund both sides of these conflicts. And if one side of that conflict has an alignment to the hidden hands objectives and morality, then they can help that entity to thrive and, sort of put tripping stones in front of somebody or a similar entity that doesn't necessarily align with the hidden hands agendas, if that makes sense. They won the war. So do you really think they're going to cast themselves as the evil villain in a story that they're telling of the glorious heroes that we're supposed to be commemorating every day? Do you remember the mighty kingdoms I mentioned earlier? We weren't playing against children. And while our brothers' backs are whipped, bound in chains, backs turned, working the land, which takes you neatly to right now, the situation at hand, although there's a fairly large gap understood. But that's just basically how most people see it. They know George Washington and a couple other presidents, and they think they know their history. But ask any scholar about the Articles of the Confederation and why don't we learn anything about those 7 presidents, and you'll get lots of different answers. And to me, it's obviously conjecture, because we don't have a time machine, and letters and documents can be faked, especially when you're dealing with the sort of situation that we have. It's just like NASA. If they're lying about one thing, then I'm going to have a hard time believing, most of the other stuff that they say, especially if it's controversial or just stupid. Just a quick word, really, to the Black American brothers and sisters. There's a lot of y'all out there blaming slavery, like on me, because I have blonde hair and blue eyes. I hate to be callous, but does this sound familiar at all? Being wrongfully prejudged because of the color of my skin or the color of my eyes. My grandfather, my grandfather's father moved here from Klamata, which is basically Greece, in the early 1900s. So I'm just third generation here. Slavery was long out the door before my lineage even arrived here. And so I just think it's, it's prejudice. It's prejudice to white people to say, we were all plant owners. Certainly not we, but our ancestors, right? And so it's just, it's prejudice. And I've got a lot of black friends, just come out and say it. It is what it is. And I always have. I've always gotten along with pretty much everyone, unless they're like, evil backstabbers. Then I tend to distance myself with people like that, just in general. It's pretty much a good rule of thumb. Now, my great-grandfather actually worked his ass off on the railroads for a smidgen a day, just like the Japanese slaves dudes were doing right next to him. So how can, people blame me or, white people for activity that occurred long before our generation anyways? We need to deal with now, deal with today. And going back in time and changing history isn't going to happen. I understand the importance of understanding history because it does tend to repeat itself. And so we can sort of gain some insight as to what's coming if we understand history. But at the same time, if most of history is subject to interpretation and embellishment and essentially just writing whatever you want to, make people feel good about the outcome of that war, then that's what they're going to do. So anyway, it was most likely Ashkenazis, or people referred to as Jews, sending the ships, building and sending the ships over to pick up and make the deals with the, I guess you could say, corrupt shaman. Would that be right? Corrupt chiefs of the Indian people. The African people to become African American slaves. That wasn't even a lot of quote unquote white people doing that. From what I gather, it was a lot of, I hate to say it, but it was a lot of Jewish boat owners from what my research tells me. And, for people to turn that into, white people were mostly the slave owners, I just doubt that. Most people were still sort of peasant class, and although a person did have the ability to homestead land, it was much safer, especially in the beginning of this colony America. It was much safer to live within the colonies as opposed to, going out into the elements where there's wild Indians, for lack of a better term. It's much safer and easier to stay with the cities. But that, people had options back then. At least it wasn't a police state, so they were free. Anyways, I just wish that everyone would quit with the whole white devil stuff, because you're being misled, and this is their only tactic to pit brothers against brothers when we need to be fighting them being the powers that ought not be, because that's how they do. That's their MO. That's how they operate. It's they turn friends against friends, either through subversion, false flags. I mean, they've got lots of different tactics to get people over, up against one another. And that certainly isn't withstanding the large multimedia outlets and such. And we're all being manipulated to increase racial tensions. This is fairly obvious to me, but this is all window dressing, just enough to confuse us just until they plant. We were fed an illusion with this whole Confederate Constitution, which I call more like prostitution of our very own futures, and we think things are doing just fine. But what about those mighty kingdoms I mentioned earlier? Did they forget their shills, or have they forgotten about the last few pennies in our dead pockets? We'll get back to that in a minute, but just to check in with you, how is everyone out there doing in their awakening? Are y'all up yet? I know most of my listeners are. You don't want to be caught slipping when it comes time to play the final round of Murder the Americans. Drink. It's Gatorade. It's good. Okay. So we were fed an illusion with this whole Confederate Constitution. Oh, I read that. Okay. So now we've established that the wealthy royals are the manipulative ones with all the contracts and fancery and constitutions, which they will use against us eventually, because that's the plan from the beginning. But they do need people to manipulate in order to hide their numbers and protect themselves against being attacked by, two or three large volumes of people. It's much better for them to have those two large volumes of people up against one another fighting, internally. That's a much better position for people to be in terms of the, hidden hand, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them. Because if we're at fear, if we're at odds, then we're much more easily controlled. And just as this isn't any sort of proof, but just sort of as a psychological premise, the good old 1984 by George Orwell, were written in the 50s, I think, really hit that point home. It really hit the point home how, we can't allow for like robotical, tyrannical governments to sway our opinions to the point where you've got, and I'm not sure whether this happened or not, but you've got snipers shooting up police officers for basically no reason. Did that police officer deserve that? Probably not. Did the one who shot that innocent dude the other day deserve something like that? I mean, that's up for debate, but he certainly deserves his day in court. I don't think that anybody who kills another person should just get off scot-free. Because they're an officer of the law, and so therefore we must always believe that they would never lie, just like Superman. The fact is most police officers, especially here in the States, are psychologically profiled so as to find maybe not psychopaths, but those with psychotic tendencies or just lack of empathy or feeling for another person or walking a mile in another person's shoes. And if you can sort of screen for that and put people on different sorts of profiles, you can sort of, fine tune who you want to be out there with a loaded pistol pulling people over for a broken taillight. And I just think that it's ridiculous and they do this because they'll kick you out if if you go to the police force and say, I want to be a police officer, and I would never do this, but they'll give you pre-tests. And yeah, if you're too smart, they won't let you be a police officer. And I think that's just one example. I mean, I haven't gone in through all this and researched, all their little tests and, how this works, but just in a broad sense, if you can find mean people who don't really care about nothing but themselves and fill up the most powerful positions, at least in terms of authority, who have these character traits, and put them into place and allow them to, level themselves up in the system and allow them to basically just go unimpeded, it's a mistake. It really is. Now, sort of lost my place here. That was all a tangent. Yeah, I was just saying they need people to manipulate. It's a giant royal ancient scam. It's nothing new. But this is where it gets really interesting. So, and if you've stuck in so far, and I'll just check the live hangout real quick, see if there's any questions I missed. Will the real Antarctica guy please stand up? Yeah, I'm not sure who's the real Antarctica guy. Cobalt Doomweaver has been here for a year. Okay, so I'm sorry, guys. I'm just reading through some of the chat comments because I've got all the time in the world. Okay, so I'll just get back to reading. I hope y'all enjoy listening, and I enjoy reading. So, but yeah, this is where it gets interesting. And if you've watched so far, either you're sleeping or you're with me until now. You probably understand that I'm not just, some other guy out there making this video for the fun of it. I've got some serious concerns, and it pertains to today, here and now. Please remember that we're not dealing with regular people on the other end of this, but instead our opponent stacked with ancient wisdom. Most of the nation you live in is controlled by their whims, or so it would appear. They've learned how to manipulate societies, and they've really got it down to a science. And we're standing around with our fists out, hands in our pockets, but it really is time for us to get real, I think. So if you're with me so far, and I promise I would never lie to you, I hereby swear that the information you're about to hear is true and correct. And if you guys can excuse me for 1 second, I'm sorry, I have something I have to go to tend to, and nobody else has showed up yet, so I'm so sorry to put you on silence. It'll just be for a minute. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, y'all. Told you it wouldn't be long. It's just kind of hard to host the show and then have something come up, and I'm only one person here, but that's okay. So yes, this is where it's going to get interesting. And if you've watched this far, you're either sleeping, so wake up, or you're with me here till now. So you probably understand that I'm not just some idiot out here making this video for the fun of it. I really have some concerns about what we've been taught all our lives, and it pertains to today, here and now, just as much as it did 500 years ago, or throughout history. Now, please remember that we're not dealing with regular people, but instead our opponent is stacked with ancient wisdom. Their records go back to many, many sources, many, many generations. And most of the nation you live in the United States is controlled by their whims. They've learned how to manipulate societies, and they have it down to a science. And so we're just sort of standing around with our fists out, hands in pocket, but it's time for us to do something or get real. Now, regardless of how old or smart you are, I asked you to please just lend me your ear for a minute and then decide which path to choose, but know that you have a choice. That's the biggest point of this, is that there is a choice. If this manipulative system we live in can rewrite history books, or rewrite history, I guess is probably the better way to put it, what other sorts of deception do you suppose they're capable of? Do you think their deception is limited strictly to history? No. You're living in a mystery of the Babylon, told of to you in the Bible. You probably read it out in Genesis, but even that isn't 100% fine. The Bible that we're reading in the King James Version has a ton of very bad translations. And, there's so many of them I couldn't even start to list them. And I can't believe that it's not butter. But it was written in 1611, which conveniently encodes the mark of the beast and the date printed. That's stretching a bit there, so I'll put that back a bit. But you do see, it's got the Monster Energy logo with the 3 1s, which stands for 666 in Hebrew. And then, of course, you've got the 6 there. So, yeah, 3 6s and then a 6 and 3 of those 1 symbols. So, anyway, yeah, that's digging it a bit. And I'm not too much into numerology, but hey, they're into it. The Masons and the Hidden Hand, they love that stuff for some reason. But most of the stories are correctly translated enough to the point where if you understand the Bible even a little bit, it'll come in good handy right about now. And most people haven't even read the first page, and or read the first page and stopped there. That's sort of what I did when I was pretty young, because Genesis states that the earth is fixed and immovable. So I threw it out as pretty much garbage immediately. I was like, okay, so this is like a fairy tale. That's what I thought for years. I was astonished to learn, many years later that, Jesus was allegedly and appears to be an actual person that lived and died. But up until that point, I always assumed that it was sort of like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. But I don't feel that way anymore, obviously. But that's sort of what the scientific or the scientism worldview does to us. It causes us to put on this totally preposterous matrix of reality and just ignore anything outside of that scope of reality or anything outside of that model, to the point to where it leaves most of our society just totally blind and unable to even look at this topic. So I'm not attacking the Bible and I'm not attacking round earthers, but I just ask people to open their eyes when you read through the Bible or any book, really, a second time, once you have this knowledge. So no, this isn't Bible class. I won't keep going about that, but this is science, not class, but it is talking about science. All the stuff that you were told since kindergarten. How would you like it if I told you that the world you're on is stationary, it's never moved a single inch, and it ain't even got a globe? Ain't even a globe, sorry. What if I told you that's what you believed before you were lied to? Some kids back in the 80s even make it to school. Wait a minute, I skipped a line. Ugh, my eyesight's going. So let me start that over. How would you like it if I told you that the world you're on is stationary, it's never moved a single inch, and it's not even a globe? What if I told you that's what you believed before you were lied to? But that's what we have on TV, and so it's what's widely believed. People believe basically anything that they see or hear over the TV, as long as it's presented, semi-logically, and they often use their high-pressure sales tactics to get people to buy into this sort of nonsense in terms of the heliocentric model, and it's a lifelong indoctrination. It never ends. They'll continue to brainwash the children as young as possible and keep everyone else attuned to that sort of brainwashing through mass media and higher levels of education, because the heliocentric model is assumed in everything, not just science, but even movie logos and covers and whatever. So yeah, this isn't Bible class. This programming I mentioned or alluded to a minute ago begins before we can even make it to school. That's often through TV as well. So if the globe is more palpable now than it was 30 odd years ago to the children forced to eat it, well, that would make sense. There's spinning globe symbols everywhere, which appear to be ingrained into our souls. The earth isn't the spinning sphere we've all been fooled into believing, and I promise that's the truth. You have to open your eyes personally, individually, and wake up and think for yourself and stop allowing these royal bastards to manipulate us into the next round of what's coming up of murdering some Americans. So the heliocentric theory goes back to the beginning, out of the gate, disagreeing with the ancient knowledge that teaches creation. But we have to go back about 14 billion years ago in theory. If we can't go back to the 1980s, and I've tried, then how can we ever go back 14 billion some odd years? Well, they say light speed and this, that, and the other, but okay. We can barely comprehend the numbers involved with light years and space travel, let alone prove things were one way or another 14 billion years back. So we have to stick with empirical proof, not assumption, tangible evidence that we can test today, and anyone can test and repeat. Now, I don't think I need to remind you guys out there that science is supposedly only dealing in facts. what is demonstrable, what is falsifiable, and what is bullshit, and what is the truth, essentially. If the Earth is indeed a spinning spheroid in a vacuum, then there's a lot of things you need to see and argue and disprove if you still believe in the globe Earth model. Again, I've been on this topic for a little over a year, and all I can find is evidence of the truth that the Earth is a stationary plane without orbital motion or axial rotation. Ultimately, the Earth has never moved even a single yard, ever. I've got some good videos up on 3 channels. A lot of you guys out there that are subscribed to the main channel here, the Morgile, don't know that I set up 2 alternate channels when I had a copyright strike. So definitely check into the Morgile 2 and then my tertiary channel, Jonathan Christopoulos, for a ton of really good stuff. And unless you've seen them all, I don't think anybody out there's seen them all. So except me, and I don't even think I've seen them all. But most people have indeed been fooled about basically everything. And so I think it's really important that we use our discernment and logic to make sure that we don't get trapped into another quagmire of deception. But hey, there's no curvature, there's no axial rotation. The heliocentric model's got to go. And the flat Earth model works well enough for me to, use some common arguments, use the azimuthal equidistant map, as long as, we put forward the caveat that, that the AE map is not an accurate representation of the face of the Earth, just as the Mercator and the Peters projections are not. So what causes wait, did I get everything here? Hold on. Okay, yeah, here we go. Get on a merry-go-round and spin it. Throw an apple or a grapefruit into the air or off to your side, away from the axis of the merry-go-round. In either case, do you expect that object to continue spinning around the axis with you once you've tossed it up in the air, or would that object do something else? Well, I'll tell you the answer. An object tossed from a merry-go-round spinning will always fall back straight to the ground. Do the same test with your parents' permission on the Earth. Does the object act like it did on the merry-go-round? Well, no, it doesn't. If that was the case, then when you threw a grapefruit into the air from the Earth, if it was spinning, it should certainly not come straight back down to the ground. In fact, the centrifugal forces exerted onto that grapefruit or that object, once tossed either up in the air or away from the center, that object is always going to tend away from the center because it's got that centrifugal force, the centripetal force, which has been released, and therefore the object will naturally want to go away from the center of axis. So the fact that, even airline flights, you can take an airplane straight up into the air, go west, go east, fly around in circles for a while, and then do a nosedive. It doesn't matter which direction you're going. And I can guarantee you that the Earth beneath you on that nosedive will be stationary every single time. And I've put videos up showing this, but if you think about this logically, and there's lots of arguments against this. For example, the atmosphere sort of velcros this airplane to the frame of reference with the Earth, which is ridiculous. But in fact, even if you had some atmosphere on a merry-go-round, you wouldn't expect those balls to simply, break the laws of physics because you had some thin atmosphere flying around at the same speed as the rotating axis beneath your feet. Now, what causes objects to behave so strangely in terms of a physical sense, and what we would expect if this Earth was a rapidly spinning sphere, over 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, plus supposedly falling around the sun at about 666 miles per hour on average? The answer is gravity and the atmosphere is spinning around the ball in perfect harmony with the ground. But this is impossible, as if the face of the Earth was a parabolic curve, then the atmosphere would necessarily go faster and faster eastward as altitude is gained. That's the only way that a object tossed straight up into the air from a merry-go-round or from the earth could possibly remain fixed along with your spinning axis once it's been fired off, is if there's some sort of intercontrolling mechanism built into that ball that allows it to do all sorts of wild accelerations and decelerations depending on which direction you throw it. All of this is, of course, ridiculous because there are some physical laws with centripetal and centrifugal forces that must be obeyed. You can't just say, well, the theory of gravity would probably explain it, but gravity has still never been proven, right? So it's just funny because Globers will use assumptions or unproven theories to prove their other unproven assumptions or theories. You can take this a step further and say, well, yeah, gravity, it's not been proven, but first we need to prove dark matter, which is this theoretical thing that's, probably also doesn't exist. And yet, when does that carrot on a stick become a pineapple on a stick? And then, a French chocolate cake, or maybe a German chocolate cake. I don't know. Yeah, German chocolate cake dangling in front of the donkey. I mean, it's always something else. If you look at NASA, it's always, we're going to do this in 20 years. We're going to have moon bases by the 1980s. Yeah, that's what they told, my parents, everybody that grew up in the space age. So, in the 1950s, 1940s even, believed that we would have moon bases for sure. That's nothing after 69. Sure, we'll have moon bases soon, and we'll have Mars bases soon. I think the level to which this huge lie has affected people, really, I don't think it can be quantified at all. I mean, people base their decisions upon their worldview or upon their paradigm. And if everyone's getting this totally bogus paradigm sort of tattooed into our subconscious for our entire lives, it's going to cause issues. Well, first of all, it's an issue because we really need to know what the hell's going on around us. But furthermore, this whole heliocentric model, the heliocentric idea, puts us in a position to where, we can thumb our noses at the Bible, because that sounds stupid, starting on page 1 from a scientific background paradigm. But there's other things too. If there are quadrillions or quintillions or however many planets in this galaxy alone, then that automatically means that Earth is nothing special. It just so happens that, it was in the Goldilocks zone of the sun, and you've got all these excuses as to how that works. But, it was just a chance. That's what they want people thinking, is our entire life here was just a cosmic freak accident, a chemical Hail Mary. And eventually, over enough time, the inanimate soup becomes one-celled or single-celled organisms. Then comes evolution. Then comes people after, this long end of evolution. But I think it's ridiculous to assume that we all started out as some microscopic cell. Hey, we got Martin Ledke. It's an old face. I hadn't seen you in a while, man. How you been doing?
I didn't know.
Hey, you're breaking up.
Hey.
You're breaking up a bit.
Give me 2 seconds. I'll come back. I'm on my shitty phone.
Okay, no worries at all. Okay, so, where was I? Yeah. So, but this is impossible. If the Earth was a parabolic curve, then the atmosphere would necessarily also be a parabolic curve. And the higher and higher up you get, the longer the arc of that curve would be. And ergo, any object, in order to stay fixed with the spinning ground beneath it, would need to accelerate faster and faster eastward, depending on their latitude. But they would have to accelerate faster and faster eastward depending on how much altitude is gained. Again, because they're traveling across a greater arc at those altitudes, there should be an apparent, retrograde to the planes as they go higher and higher. They should start apparently heading west for a plane traveling east and raising in altitude. But that's sort of irrelevant. People don't like to sit down and think that sort of thing out. But if you actually do, there's some really good proofs surrounding airline flights. But I won't get into all that now. I've hit that topic so many times. People are probably sick of hearing it. But besides, how can the atmosphere even exist in the helio balls out model if it's gravity, you say with a scream? But science demands we use empirical evidence that we can measure and touch more than we need these lame ass theories, or touch more than we can with these lame ass theories. The lame ass theories always involve systems that are so far spread out that it would be physically impossible to travel to even the nearest star. I think it would take several human lifetimes in the heliocentric model. But when you realize if they're faking the moon, which should be a lickety splits, hop, skip, and a jump, since they've already done it so many times, according to them, then, that would be the best place to model out, setting up and terraforming another world. But the fact is they've never taken any steps towards any sort of mining or setting up infrastructure on the moon, which we were promised. That was the reason why our Congress and our people wanted to, so heavily fund the space program. And sure, there was fear porn involved. You had the whole Russian Sputnik rocket thing, which I think that is still bull. And I wonder if that's what they were pointing to back then, if that's the same ISS we've got today. Interesting thought. But besides, I'm just mentioning this observation: what goes up must come down. This is not a lame-ass theory. This is an observation. What goes up must come down. And it's really not argued. Did we get Martin?
We've got Antonio.
Oh, hey, man. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Sorry about the delay. Just hectic last minute bunch of stuff to do. I just got a message from GeoShifter saying, are you going on the Mogal? Just as I'm waiting for the Hangout. You know when you press the Hangout and you're waiting for it to kind of scroll to let you in?
Yeah, I've been having so many problems with Hangout and well, not YouTube. Well, yeah, I guess I've been having problems with YouTube. It's just, I don't know, for some reason, I don't know, did they do an upgrade just to make it more aggravating?
Yeah, probably. Let me see. I'm going to switch my notifications off. And Geo's coming on. Cool.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So, I was just, since I had no other guests, I was just reading well, not a book, but like an audiobook video that I wrote out a few months ago, and I never just finished producing it. So this is sort of a good little sneak peek and sort of a quick way for me to record the narrative. But
okay.
Since I've got you here, I don't necessarily have to.
I was going to say I'm happy to sit back and listen. Well,
let's see. It's almost done. There's the rest of this page and then the beginning of another page. So yeah, I'll just finish reading this up.
Cool.
Unless the viewers are like, no, make him stop. I don't know. I can't see the chat group from here. I can check.
Right, well, I'll go and have a look at the chat. I'll mute my mic and let you carry on, okay?
All right, man. Thanks.
All right, cool.
Okay. So let's see here. Where was I? So how can the atmosphere even exist in the helio-Ballalot model? It's gravity, right? And okay, and so I got to what goes up must come down. It's not part of this argument. Obviously that is a cogent observation. What goes up will indeed come down, unless you're talking about a helium balloon, then that's a little different. I'm just noting that this observation would be impossible to repeat in any situation where you're stuck on the side of a spinning sphere flying around in space. But you say somehow, or Globers say somehow, that the observation what goes up must come down, is proof of the world being a spinning sphere, even exclusive proof of the world being a spinning sphere and gravity. But this is just the opposite of science. I mean, we should have another term altogether, just like ignorance, and, just start using that for science, or maybe liance. And the ISS is the international shit show, really. All lowercase too. There's so many obvious proofs that you can test and think about and confirm the shape and nature of the world for yourself. What sort of guide to awakening would I be if I didn't share the expected curvature tests? And I'll just get right into that real quick, and then you can check it. If the Earth was a sphere with the given proportions, so approximately 24,000 miles around at the equator, then any flat land or the surface of all water should fall away, vertically dropping at 8 inches per mile squared, or about 0.666 feet per mile squared. Now, see if you can measure for that anywhere. Where's the curvature? Where? So, I go into a bit the geocentric history of the world, but, it's not complete, so I'll just stop it there. And tell me, how have you been doing, Antonio and GeoShifter?
Oh, good. I've been doing good. I've been keeping up with this. The changes they've been doing to the theories. They're now changing the maths for the curvature. They've changed the explanation to why the atmosphere doesn't float away. It used to be gravity. Now it's lack of air pressure, which is kind of an extension of the whole gravity. Yeah, really. It's a lack of air pressure. The higher you go, the less pressure there is, and therefore, it's like, oh, okay. So next to no pressure or no pressure whatsoever, and the boundary conditions, this is something they don't like to discuss when talking about the atmosphere, the very uppermost, the most thinly spread layer of gases, or the outermost range of...
Right, like the Kármán line, I guess, that's what they call it?
Yes. They don't like to discuss the boundary conditions because, first, they haven't got a clue, because they haven't got on there to check. So everything's on theory, but the theory breaks down because for something to stay around, for a gaseous form of any type to stay next to a body that's being bombarded with heat and radiation from a sun, which is also moving around, it violates Newton's law. Newton's law, I think it's the second law of motion. A body will stay at rest unless acted upon by another body, whichever one of the laws it is. So, if you're a molecule of gas, you're a little range of gas, and the body that you're around is speeding faster than a rifle bullet, then the easiest thing for you to do is just remain at rest, which is remain where you are, not keep up with this globe, So it's bullshit, and we know it is.
Well, I agree. I think the whole Kármán line idea is really quite silly because, not even just for space travel sort of scenarios where you've got these huge fluxes in temperature from very, very high during the daytime side and very, very low in the nighttime side, and that would cause constant. They're doing a trip around the world allegedly once every 90 minutes or so. So they'd be going through this temperature flux to the point to where the ISS would need some fairly regular, constant exterior maintenance just to make sure that nothing's off by 1/10 of a nanometer or whatever. All that stuff has to be very precise. And when we start to realize, even if they're up there, they're still lying to us. And by up there, they could be shooting a lot of this stuff from weather balloons or just CGing it. And another thing that you had mentioned too, Antonio, just sort of brought into mind the Cavendish experiments. He allegedly measured gravity or measured the gravitic constant, or he said that it was he weighed the Earth. But he basically took two giant lead balls. We've all seen the Cavendish experiments. But so if his lead balls create gravity, but no other lead balls in the world or no other objects in the world do, shouldn't we be able to see, like, if you are at the top of a very tall skyscraper, if you drop a feather off of that and say it's perfectly still, or in a vacuum would be better, wouldn't that feather sort of have to stick to that building? Because the gravity of that building would be far more than the feather, and that would that should either align with or go against Cavendish's findings. And I tend to believe that Cavendish may not have even existed as an actual single person.
Do you know what?
Did Cavendish put water on his balls? I bet you he did not.
Well, the whole thing with the Cavendish experiment is that he set up this contraption and was looking at it from across the lawn. If the guy actually existed, I don't know whether he did it or didn't. The story is, in his mansion, he had this area, and he was looking through a telescope at how these things were moving, and therefore determined how much the Earth weighs, and Mars, and the Moon, and everything else. It's like, hold on a second, at what point do you call somebody a charlatan? At which point does somebody tell you something where you go, you're talking nonsense? You're a charlatan. What are you saying?
Well,
because he didn't know the whys and the wherefores, and nobody has replicated it since. The only way that people can use it to demonstrate anything is by actually manipulating it. They set up something that looks like it, and then they put the hands on it. It's always a smaller, scaled down version, and they move things around with the hands. Like, no, how about you set one up? At MIT, set one up. Let's video it. Let's see what happens. But no, because he didn't leave enough notes, because he was a freaking charlatan.
Well, I argued a lot on my comments threads for about, I don't know, a good year, and it got to the point where I just couldn't keep up with it and do, other things in life. So I had to slack off on my comments. But, at first I was like, man, there's either a lot of really just, I wouldn't say stupid, but really deeply brainwashed people out there, or there's a lot of shills. Because, like, if you can show somebody several good proofs, I mentioned just a few of them so far, but if you can show these proofs to somebody, it should spark up enough in them to want to debunk it. And in doing so, that means that they're going to have to research the topic itself, flat Earth topic. And if they've got any sort of, dignity, or if they really do want to understand the truth, then, this should be a real easy one for them to debunk. So, that'd be great. But on the other hand, most of the cases that I've seen, people that actually do the diligent research conclude that there's something to this. And so what I found through arguing, over these months is many people, not many, but several people who I thought were shills ended up, apologizing and, subscribing and becoming flat earthers. Then there's people that I still think are shills, and some of them are even, flat earth proponents. They'll put out some just really ridiculous arguments that aren't very cogent. I wouldn't bring them up. But they parade these sort of, I can't give an example, maybe the dome in the sky, I don't know, that's sort of a broad one. But, people think that there's a dome in the sky, and so we all must think that to be flat earthers. I don't think so. And does that make sense? That I just hate to ascribe any one trait to this thing that's arrived at by theory. Even if it's biblical theory. People will say, oh, what about the firmament? I thought you were a Christian. Well, where do you get your words from? You're getting your words from the King James Bible. And the word for firmament was just expanse in the original Hebrew. It simply meant expanse, for the vault of the sky. I don't think that they wanted to necessarily make it physical. And oh, by the way, Geo Shifter, how have you been doing, man? I was going to introduce you. Good.
No, thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be here, and awesome that you are doing season 2. And hi, Antonio.
Hi. I think everybody's looking forward to the next thing you do, Gio. I know that you've been busy with life, with real life things in your environment. But
yeah, I've been busy, but also I didn't find many topics to make videos. I don't know. Sometimes I find something, and the same day I make a video, and it's an awesome video. And sometimes there's a month that goes by and you can't find anything interesting or interesting enough to make a video. So lately I didn't make much videos. Also real life was busy, but I will make more soon.
I think this might be why the media, the organizations out there, they say, oh God, there's nothing going on, let's do a hoax, you know.
Yeah, there has been many hoaxes, but I try to stick to flat earth. I don't want to do too much hoax stuff.
Yeah.
Flat earth and anti-government also.
Yeah, but you know what I found though? I really have found this. There are these like lulls of activity. You know, there's like all the creative thought. There's lots of creativity, lots of observations, lots of videos, and then a lull, like a night period.
Yeah, true.
And then again, a resurgence. And I've noticed also that it's in this night period that the arguments from the globalings recalibrated, you know, reworded, rephrased, or redone altogether. It's in these lulls, you know, they then come back with a different type of maths for the curvature. You know, they say, oh, well, the 8 inches per mile squared is really just an average, because as you move around the globe, the curvature gets more and more acute. You know, at the equator, it's a much bigger circle than, you know, 52 degrees, 60 degrees, whatever.
God, that is ignorant now, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's what, you know. So they say, well, you know, it's just an average. But what I think was really cool, I was talking to one of my globaling friends who was trying to explain.
Could you hold that thought real quick? Because I was just going to say the reason that that's so ridiculous is because if it was a sphere, then no matter where you're standing, every direction away from you should be downhill. You know, unless you're going up a mountain, of course. So let's not be silly. But that's why I don't think land, and I believe most flat earthers and sphere earthers would agree that land isn't really a great measuring stick here or baseline, because of the different changes in elevation and such. But even when you have those changes in elevation and fill it up with water, then water's always going to find its level. And so, yeah, if you're standing out on the ocean, every direction should be downhill from you, from your perspective. Yeah. But it isn't.
And they say, well, what it is, Mr. Flat Earther, you don't understand what sea level means. Sea level means at the point of the sea. It's like, wait a second, this point, there's a difference between the sea, the Atlantic and the Pacific, you know. That's why they have the locks at you know, the Panama Canal. So when you're talking, which one? It's like, no, the sea level, they say, well, this is how it works. Sea level is sea level, and it's on a curve. Look, I can show you with a drawing. It's like, well, I can show you that it's flat with a photograph. You know? It's like, well, no, don't show me the photograph. Look, anyway, that photograph is a mirage. Look at this drawing. You see how it's curved? It's like, yeah, that's a drawing. This is a photograph. You see how the photograph is showing that land way over there that should be beyond the curve? And they're like, yeah, that must be a mirage. So Rob Skiba did the freaking Chicago skyline thing. I told a globaling friend of mine who was trying to explain to me, he's a computer guy and I'm an artist. I'm not saying that one trumps the other. You know, in computer world, his trumps me. In depicting freaking shit, I, you know, trump him. He's telling me that the Chicago skyline, the famous Chicago skyline mirage, is a mirage. It's an inverted mirage. I point out to him that the word inverted means upside down or inside out. Obviously, it's not inside out. And point out that it isn't a mirage because there's no distortion. So I told him, Rob Skiba just did this thing where he went from Chicago away for 40 miles and back. And the skyline was there all the time. It didn't become a mirage. And he just did the double blink. There's this double blink thing that happens with cognitive dissonance. There's either the wide-eyed stare or the double blink when somebody looks at something, then tries it and deletes it with the second blink. Just deletes it as if they haven't heard it. And it's fascinating to me because no matter what, even if we had a balloon with a crew go up like Picard and took a video and showed it flat and showed, look, there's Australia. Let's suppose that this was possible. There's Australia, there's Africa, and there's South America. Okay, even if we showed them this, they would still do this double blink, and you know their brain wouldn't register that. They would still be on a globe.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to see what's right in front of your face if you've been conditioned not to see things properly. The human mind, I mean, we think that we're all very much, 100% in control of our minds, and we are to a degree, but the subconscious mind, really not so much. And I think this has a lot to do with the mass media outlets having just front row and center in everyone's house growing up. And they've been able to sort of, I believe, manipulate us and manipulate our tendencies, and even, especially with the internet, sort of get feedback on, what people are thinking about a topic, and sort of use that to their advantage to, to whatever ends. But yeah, the Chicago skyline being a mirage, that's what that stupid weatherman said when Josh Nowicki first sent that pic in. It's almost 60 miles. And if you just subtract out, say 10 miles for the guy's elevation, it's still 50 miles. The tops of those buildings should be well beneath the horizon line. And to say that's refraction, it's really sort of the opposite of what refraction should be doing.
Yeah,
and that's only one picture, because it's more than a year ago that they took that picture, and there's been so many experiments and examples of other places and other pictures that show the same. It can't all be a mirage.
Right.
And then Rob Skiba proved it, yeah. Also, I'm doing YouTube now for over a year. I have been researching Flat Earth for probably, I think, almost 2 years. And still, I didn't find any proof for the globe. And not even that. It seems that no one found it. No one ever sent me an email with good proof. I've got in all the time that I did YouTube, I got 10 emails or so of someone trying to prove the globe, and it was total nonsense. So they are not even trying. There's nothing.
Yeah, and I'd often say, okay, I think to myself, is this person a shill? And if they're vulgar and they're doing that sort of thing, I usually just boot them if I see that sort of thing going on. But a lot of times I think that people are just defending what they believe. And that's a natural thing to do. We all did it. I did it.
Yeah, and that's good, but they can't find the proof to defend it. That's the thing. All
Right.
they come up with is theories and assumptions and Cavendish experiments and stuff.
And unfortunately, I've had these kind of people too. Unfortunately, there's very few that will go away saying, that's a good question, I'm going to look into that. There's very few of them. There's maybe 1 in 1,000, less than 1 in 1,000.
Usually if you make a good solid point that technically they should rebut if they're going to have a discussion about this, they'll just say, oh, well, I debunked that a few days ago, so whatever.
Yeah.
That's what I get a lot. It's like, okay, so if you debunked that yesterday, I'd really love to hear, what your thoughts are on this, and then you never hear anything back from them. So, yeah, I think that a lot of these responses that I've gotten, at least me personally, have been maybe a dozen people, maybe less than that, with each, multiple YouTube accounts that they can use in order to troll my videos and make it appear as if there's this, massive numbers of people who are, thumbing flat Earth videos down and arguing against it. But I think that's very much inflated, and it's just another tactic. It's the whole herd mentality thing, and if they can create doubt in what we're purporting, without discrediting our arguments or even discrediting us, but just by giving people bad answers to questions that they've asked, and just giving people all around bad information. That this goes on the flat Earth side and the globe Earth side too. And I really think that that's sort of their tactic. And I just hope that we're able to see through that. And I think most people can. But
yeah, but what I've noticed is that these guys, they loiter around like the new flat earthers. They make comments to people that are obviously new to flat Earth. I don't know if it's an attempt to put them off, because nobody's actually. I can't see somebody being put off. Somebody seeing the flatness and going, damn it, I can't believe I thought it was a globe. And then somebody.
It takes way more than that.
Yeah, I mean, for somebody to come along and say, no, what you're seeing is not what you're seeing. You're seeing an illusion. We really are on a globe. I can't see a flat earth going, oh, right, oh, okay, you know?
Right.
But it's almost like they loiter around there to put pressure for prospective flat earth, for people just looking into it. But I think they assume that the level of consciousness that is being experienced, if they assume that they can stop that, because if I'm just going to suppose that I'm a globeling, that I don't know, that I've got a question, that I've watched the clues and various other things, and I see a comment by a new flat earther saying, dude, I can't believe this so-called Chicago skyline, I can't believe they say it's a mirage. And along comes one of these shills saying, of course it's a mirage, da, 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 da. I wouldn't think, oh, right, this guy just said, of course it's a mirage, it must be, you know?
Right.
I just think, really, why are these guys getting so attacked?
Right, and I even go so far as to believe that all of those little sub comments, you know, so like a shill goes in and puts a honest, innocent question, and then that same shill with multiple different accounts goes in response to it with all these different, very, you know, complex and you know, hard to sort of understand numbers and theories, and then the original poster of the question would be like, oh, okay. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and that right there is really a good way to get people browsing and sort of looking at this. A lot of people read the comments first. They won't even watch the video. They'll read the comments first, and if the top 5 comments are negative stuff from shills claiming to have debunked this and debunked that but never show any proof, a lot of regular people are just going to move on from the topic just because of that. You know?
Yeah. And what I found is, you know, there's a flat earth 100% debunked. One of my globaling friends, when I was looking at the I looked at the flat earth. I spent however long looking. My mind was blown. I was laughing my head off when I saw it.
Yeah.
One of the things that, to my ignorant mind, was the moon being the opposite way around, you know, from the different sides of the equator. And then I did an experiment myself with my own ceiling, and I thought, oh my God, this is how. And then I just laughed. It just all came together, and I was literally laughing my head off, like just on my own. My neighbors must have thought I was nuts. I was just laughing. So anyway, I go and see my globaling friends. I tell them, oh my God, my mind's been blown. The Earth is freaking flat. They're like, what? So I tell them. 2 days later, they've been looking into it, they say, but they haven't. They'll be looking at the video saying, flat earth debunked. And they say, no, flat earth, they won't look at this guy. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's a half-wit. You're believing this guy who said, oh yeah, well, if the earth was flat, how come the ships go over the horizon? You know, oh God. How? So it's almost like they'll just go for whatever's most convenient to validate their sense of, well, their ego, basically. They don't want to think that they've been tricked or fooled.
Yeah, as if we've never heard that argument, right?
Yeah.
I had one I really liked. That they were doing the same thing, but theirs was day and night. They were like, well, how could it be day in China and night in the U.S.? And so this means that they actually have the presupposition that our collective research is on the level with their research, which is zero research. But in fact, what they're arguing, I mean, we all know that claim, and these claims have been, you know, satisfactorily, completely debunked. And so, you know, my whole thing is I would have thought that a lot more people, and a lot more people are waking up this year, I think, but I thought it would have been bigger than this because, or at least by now, because you know, it's just so obvious, and there's a lot of steam behind it right now. But you know, there are.
But John, I think it is bigger than we can see. I really do. Not just the sun tracking experiment. There were so many people, but also when we've had meetings, the amount of people that turn up that don't have channels, that don't make comments, you know, but obviously they're keeping up with things and are coming to the meetings. I mean, if we take that as a sample of the people, it's like maybe a quarter of the people that were there were content providers. The rest weren't. So it's very difficult well, it's impossible to calculate how many of those people there are because they don't raise their hand, you know. They don't let themselves be countered. But in terms of numbers, I think it's a lot more than we would even imagine.
Yeah, I think the same. Just look at conspiracy forums. You see Flat Earth show up every day now on every conspiracy forum, so people are thinking about it.
Yeah. I think it really is going to come. I watched the Matt Powerland thing yesterday, where he's saying it's going to get to the point within 6 months or not much further, where half of what's discussed online will be flat Earth. And I can see that happening. Maybe, I don't know whether 6 months or not, but I can see it. You know, I can really see it. Some people would just posit a question, you know, hey, if the Earth is a ball, how can we see so much further away than we ought to? You know, just that, and just putting that question out there, because it is a good question. How can you see much further than you should be able to? And we can. We obviously can. Hey, we have somebody new.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hey.
Hello, welcome.
Good to see all you guys and your smiling faces.
That sounds like Zen Garcia, but I can't see the box.
No, it's Robo Shark. How you doing, man? How's your poetry?
Oh, how do I?
I'm doing well, thank you, Antonio.
Oh, there you are.
Nice to meet you, man.
I caught your show the other day, the Static Plain Truth. That was pretty good. You guys, John, you getting that show back on is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, you're on it now, so this is episode 2, and hopefully, yeah, it's been pretty cool so far, I think.
Yeah, well, I
People
mean,
showed up. That's always good, and we're talking flat Earth.
yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, absolutely, absolutely. So,
So what are we talking about?
well, we were just somebody had the floor a second ago. Was that Antonio? Did you want to finish up? What's
Probably me with my mouth that doesn't stop. Yeah, we were talking. What we were actually talking about was the number of people. We've had a couple of meetings. You know, I went to the Bedford level experiment that we did recently, and I went to the Oxford place, and the amount of people who were content providers who had channels, who are known, well, who have outed themselves as flat earthers, or who have, you know, let people, the world know that they are flat earthers. There were maybe a quarter of the people there were people like you, me, John, Gio. The rest of the people were not, didn't have channels, didn't make comments. So that's you know, from what we see in terms of people making flat earth videos and posting flat earth comments, there's 3 times as many not posting flat earth comments and videos. That's a large number.
Well, I think a lot of people still have that fear factor, and this lessens with time, but people don't want to be considered as stupid or outside the box, because what a lot of people have seen is, you know, they've seen the arguments, they've been convinced, they've knocked themselves in the head a few times trying to get over this and concluded that the Earth is flat. Now, they can't necessarily go, you know, talking about that sort of thing at work, because they're going to get fired.
Yes.
People are going to think you're crazy, and it really is sad. But yeah, people will think you're crazy for this, and so that's why, you know, it's sort of nice to be able to do things online from home, and you're not out there getting pelted with tomatoes and rotten cabbage or whatever.
Yeah. Also,
Which does happen.
Yeah, but you get a thicker skin, don't you? You know, when at first you're just making comments and you get these trolls calling you a fucktard, you should have been aborted, all of these things. Yeah, you have a lovely view on life. And then you carry on and your skin gets thicker. And I think a lot of the people who are not providing content, it's not just that maybe their skin's not quite so thick. Maybe it's also the case that they assume that making videos is a skill that we all have, and they don't. It's this hard to arrive at skill, and it's not.
Yeah, that's something that kept me, because I didn't make videos for a long time. And Antonio, you were very prime in, you know, saying, hey, you know, you already have a lot of content. Why don't you just post it? See if anybody likes it. And, you know, I just, my main way of thinking was, nobody's gonna like anything that I thought was cool. Like I wrote a whole bunch of stuff and I wrote it and I thought it was cool, but nobody else is gonna like it. So why would I post it? But I mean, I got maybe not that many, but like 600 views, and somebody obviously likes it.
Yeah,
What's your YouTube channel? Because I don't know you.
My channel,
Is it
RoboShark? RoboShark 82.
Okay, I will watch our videos. Cool, man.
And what happens, Rob? What happens is that the numbers they creep up over time. And I remember what I said to you, that even if one single person gets touched by what you do, he writes really cool poetry. This is what this dude does.
Nice.
Not just about flat Earth, but about being human. And I remember saying to you, it was on a hangout, that even if you reach one single other human, that human then feels a sense of they no longer feel isolated. They say, oh man, I'm not the only one thinking this or feeling this or seeing this, So even if it's just one single human, it's worth doing.
And I've gotten so many comments and replies to some of the stuff that I wrote, and people saying, wow, I've felt that way my whole life, and I've never heard anybody else explain it the way you explained it. And I say, well, that's just what I was feeling at the time. And they say, well, man, you explained it just the same way I was feeling. And it made me feel good, because I was thinking, wow, this particular person heard what I wrote and they identified with it,
That's it. And there's also the degrees of separation. You can touch this one individual's heart. That one individual's that act of touching that one individual's heart can have ramifications. Well, we know that the ramifications it will have, we don't know. There's no way that we can we could keep track of them if we wanted to dedicate.
It's all exponential. It's exponential. It just keeps on growing.
And it's positive. This is the thing, if you change somebody's mood from dark to light, that carries on. And the whole pay it forward and all of that, it's all things that have been tested. These are things that really work in the real world. And it's so easy. It is so easy. I used to give out hugs send out hugs to the trolls, who are all bitter, you should have been aborted, and does somebody need a hug? I used to do that. Sometimes I enjoy a bit of a tussle with them, but generally speaking, if I think this person's really freaking dark and negative, I would do that, because it's something that works. And not just this, the example I've given, but anybody putting a video out there, making a comment that helps somebody else who's struggling, against freaking trolls or whatever. It all counts. Every single action like that is the tipping of the first domino, and we don't know what the rest of the dominoes do, but we know that they fall. And eventually, this is what the whole struggle between globe and flat Earth is. It's all dominoes. All the dominoes were fallen for the globe before, and now they're falling the other way around. And eventually, it's going to be the case that it turned out there were never any dominoes anyway. It was all an illusion, like life. I think.
Especially life on the net.
I 100% agree with that.
What did you say, John?
Yeah. Sorry, I had myself muted there a second. No, some really good points brought up, and I intended to take notes, and I didn't, because I was just blown away by what you were saying, or not blown away, but sort of just entranced by what you're saying. By the way, you guys, I am very, very sick today.
I think.
Yeah. I had a giant tick on me a few days ago. I found it and pulled it off, but I've got like symptoms of early Lyme disease, which is pretty serious.
Yeah.
So I feel like crap, but this topic always just seems to uplift me, because we all were just so in the dark. I mean, it's just crazy how far in the dark. I can speak of me personally, how in the dark I was in terms of being accurate with what I believed. But this topic here, it really is. You know, you talk about dominoes or maybe even like bowling pins, not billiards, whatever you call bowling. There's a proper name for it. I'm sure of it. But
the pins, the
pins. If you hit that one right pin, you can get them all in one shot.
Yes.
I think that flat Earth really does have that sort of, you know, potential. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, sort of, because if you look at flat Earth, or if you start to look at flat Earth and you believe it, and you never heard of other conspiracies or never believed in it, it all makes sense suddenly. Because if they lie about the shape of the Earth, they probably lie about everything. So, in a way, it does.
Yeah, they lied to manipulate us, and you know, the spherical Earth is just one example. But you know, you go look at history. That's full of changes and, you know, inconsistencies and subversion. Science, or theoretical sciences especially, that includes, you know, the evolution theorists. That's
the one thing that's pissing me off lately is the idea that history has been changed. Because I used to consider myself to be somebody that really looked into history. You know, I feel like I know history, and now you can't trust any of it.
Yeah. Well, the thing with history, when looking back, you have these kind of regression, you know, in terms of dates. So you have dates and events, and these go back in time to a point where they blur. The dates remain, but the language changes.
Yes.
Instead of was born on, it becomes believed to be from this area. You know, people like Pythagoras. It's like, at what point did that happen? At what point were the people no longer keeping records? You know, oh well, the records were at the Library of Alexandria. No. There would have been records all over the place. The Library of Alexandria would have been a hub where people go, copy records, and take them somewhere else. It would have been a massive source of income for that area. It's not just, oh, all the records are missing, so we can only go from hearsay. You know, well, what hearsay? The hearsay is only in the books of what was written. There's no Greek people saying, oh yes, my great grandfather was friends of Pythagoras. You know, there's no people saying anything like that. So it sounds like things have been inserted, and so that, you know, they don't have to be too exact in case some record comes up. They can just say generally around this area and around this era. You think, wow, how much vague can you get? But talking of things that are nonsense, John, health is a big one, and you've mentioned, you know, Lyme's disease. Make yourself some colloidal silver. Okay, make yourself like 2 liters of it. It doesn't cost much at all. Well, you need a purifier, a water distiller, some silver, and 9-volt batteries. Make yourself like 2 liters of it and consume it over a period of 2 days. And I pretty much guarantee.
I wanted to hear you guys talk about the colloidal silver a lot more, because I don't really know much about it. But the last time I heard you, I think Antonio, you and Patricia were talking about it, and I was very interested, but I didn't really get the whole spiel as to the benefits of it.
Well, but what it is, you know, it's a mineral. Silver, it's a metal. Once you've detached it from the bindings that it has to the actual metal itself, to the rods, it spins, and it spins because it's unbalanced in terms of polarity. It's too negatively charged, so it gravitates towards things that are positively charged in order to balance itself out. It does this just magnetically. It's just a natural thing that it does. Everything that's bad for you is positively charged. So all the bacteria, all the viruses, all the fungi that are bad for the human body, because there are bacteria that are good for the human body. So anything that's actually
they get attached to it.
Well, not only do they get it, they don't get attached to it. They get pulled to it gravitationally, magnetically. They are magnetically drawn to it. It's in the bloodstream. It's floating around. When it enters an area where there's a virus or a bacteria or a fungus, it will naturally be magnetized towards it. When it reaches it, the virus, the bacteria, or the fungus has a boundary, and we're talking at the molecular level. Each cell has its own boundary, and that boundary is like its own environment, its atmosphere, and that's what's highly positively charged. It's so positively charged that the body, which is generally alkaline, is too weak to remove. You know.
Then what? You just expel it out, like in your defecation?
Well, this is kind of cool. What the colloidal silver does is, because it's a metal, it's much stronger in terms of its energy than the body's overall alkalinity. It will rip the atmosphere, so the environment that the virus has. It will just pop it. It will literally pop by taking the positivity away and making it part of the colloidal silver itself. The colloidal silver is now balanced and won't do any more work. But where it has taken this positivity from, and we're talking in terms of polarity here, not in terms of good or bad, where it has taken that plus from, that now is destroyed. It needed to be, let's say, the boundary of a cell needed to be 12 plus. Okay. Well, now it's only 4 plus. 8 plus has gone with a colloidal silver. It basically bursts like a bubble. And what's inside the bacteria or the virus is generally proteins. It's an organism that has protein.
Yeah.
So anything that can be used by the body does. The body will use it and actually, derive nutrients out of it. And the rest, it will just defecate or pee out or sweat out. So that's how it works. And the studies that have been done, they've been done over a long period of time. They've been confirmed all over the place. There were 2 engineers, a bioengineer and an engineer, a mechanical engineer, both of which, these 2 guys were so bright, okay, that what they did is they patented the treatment of human conditions with silver colloids. It's patented. So in the patent, it tells you the studies. It tells you how much silver parts per million, what does what, how it kills what, in the whole patent. And because it's a patent, it's public. Anybody can go and have a look. Okay, so
that's really interesting.
Yeah, because for a patent to be granted, whatever is being claimed by the patent has to be verified. It has to be true. You can't just patent something that's not true. So it means by the act of them having patented it, and they've not, they've made it open source, they're not claiming anything for it, they just patented it with all of the studies. And anybody can go to the patents office and get it, get a copy of the patent. I had one, several pages long. It kills everything. It kills Ebola, everything in the right concentrations. So what I'm saying to you, John, is if you suspect that you have Lyme's disease, just consume as quickly as you can. It can't do you any harm because it's negatively charged. It can't do your body, which is also negatively charged, any harm at all. The worst that will happen is you will pee it away and have wasted it, but it won't turn you blue or silver. It will just
Yeah, no, and I have looked into it a while back, and I read some pretty interesting, research and just people doing their own testing with it for different conditions, and I saw and found some good stuff. And then, of course, it appeared to me that you also have sort of an opposition group against this, because any sort of truth that's going to have a major impact on the status quo in any one of its many, many sectors is going to have an opposition. And ultimately, the best form of opposition for them would be to own it or to co-opt it, and that's what they've done throughout history. That's sort of their MO. And so it's important to me that we don't allow this conversation to get steered, and not Patricia steered, just steered off of the course of logic and reason. You know, I've mentioned this before, but you know, there's dozens and dozens, if not 100 or 2 or 4, however many hundred proofs of a flat Earth or disproofs of a spinning sphere Earth. I think both are relevant sorts of arguments. But at the end of the day, we really don't even need to get that technical.
Yeah, one of the things with this colloidal silver is you had the big propaganda campaign against it with Papa Smurf.
Where do you buy it?
You don't have to buy it. If you buy it, I wouldn't buy it. I would just make it. All you need is 9-volt batteries. You know, the square batteries. 9-volt batteries.
Yeah.
A series of them. So I use 4. You know, you join 4 together in a series. You've got positive and negative out. Okay. You put clips on those. You know, whatever clips you want. You know, the ones that actually are made for 9-volt batteries.
The alligator clips.
Yeah. Yeah, but you don't. Yeah, you don't need to actually have the clips. You can just wrap it around the actual silver rod. So the
as long
only
as there's
important
contact, yeah.
Yeah, the only important thing is that between the battery, the wire, and the rod, there's in that arrangement, you don't then ground it or short it by having any kind of metal lid or anything like that. That will basically just use up the energy, and you want the circuit to be completed by the water. You want the water, the distilled water.
The energy is going through the wire and straight into the water.
Yeah, what's happening is the energy is going through the wire, through the positive and the negative wires to the silver rods, and those rods are trying to come arc. What they want to do is the energies want to arc in the water, but because they're separated and there's water between the two, you will have silver that will separate itself and be drawn towards the other rod. Okay, so you'll have silver from the positive and silver from the negative. It looks like clouds in the water. It's really, or smoke. It looks really cool. They get drawn
this yourself?
Say again?
You've done this yourself with a 9-volt battery?
Yeah, I do it all the time.
Am I the only one getting major feedback, or is that just me?
I think it's just you. It's okay for me.
Yeah, okay, here also.
Don't hear any feedback.
So do you need silver rods?
You need fine silver rods. So you want at least 4 9s. So you'll have silver purity of it would be 9 point, and it's the 9s after the point. So you want 0.9999 silver.
Yeah.
If you only have 3.
The expensive ones.
Yeah, but they're not so expensive. You know, you need, say, if you have 12 inches, a strip of 12 inches, cut it in half. You've got 2 rods of 6 inches. That will cost you maybe, I don't know, $7. So it's not that expensive. And from these rods, you can make gallons.
This video.
Yeah, so this is the way you make it.
This is tinfoil hat wearing lady. She's cool. This is one of the people that I bought some colloidal silver. I ordered some from the Alex Jones channel, and it never arrived. And I was so pissed off that I thought, well, fuck this. I'm going to learn how to make it myself.
Oh, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
We need to truth bomb Alex Jones.
Hey?
Do they still do the call-in shows? The Alex Jones channel?
Oh, I don't know if they do. I've not watched for a long time.
I think we need to truth bomb them.
Yeah, I tell you what, this woman, she's got a load of subscribers, and she's really switched on. I would love somebody to reach out to her and find out what she thinks about the flat Earth.
I don't trust her.
Yeah, she looks like she's probably got a lot of truth inside her, but maybe she hasn't come across the flat Earth yet.
Yeah.
I think she's a shill. I don't remember why, but I remember I saw some videos from her that made me stay away from her and don't trust her. But I don't remember why.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has the limit, you know, this thing where their ego will step in and say, no, you're not going down this avenue.
Yeah. You know, I know a lot of people that they'll tell you that they know the truth about 9/11. They know the truth about Sandy Hook and Boston bombing and these kinds of things. but when it comes to flat Earth, they will stop right there and tell you you're a crazy nutter. And it's like, okay, well, I guess that's your limit.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, but everybody
Often,
has this. Yeah, everybody at some point has this. I think one of the things that a wise person would do is try to find what their limits are. I don't know. I mean, you can't. Really
Alex Jones is another good example because he avoids it every time.
Yes.
I hope that I don't have any limit.
So yeah, I had
Either,
looked
I
in,
just want the truth.
jumping back to the colloidal silver real quick. I had an issue. I had got some feedback, and then I had my mic on pause. But yeah, I watched this. This was sort of the first thing I ever watched on it. She was making them out of pennies, but you could use any sort of silver, right?
No. Well, you have to use fine silver. It doesn't matter where it comes from, as long as it's fine silver, because there's also sterling silver, which has been mixed with nickel, and that kind of silver. There are various different compounds that a silver can be mixed with in order for it to be an alloy and bulk it. So you want the finest silver that you can get your hands on, and you will find 0.9999 silver. In fact, you'll find silver that has 7 and 8 nines. Really, really pure silver. But silver that's sterling will have nickel, and this will stop the silver from acting the way that colloidal silver acts, and the body will try to reject the nickel, which is what there are people who think that they're allergic to silver because if they wear a silver ring, they get a black mark around the finger where the ring is. They're not allergic to silver, they're allergic to nickel, because nickel's a volatile.
Yeah, I know I'm terribly allergic to nickel because, like a silver chain is usually not 100% pure silver. But if I would wear something like that, like a necklace or a wristband or even a watch with the back plate of that watch is metal nickel.
No, I've never heard of that. People being allergic to different metals.
I would break out into hives literally within a single day of wearing it. So I definitely wouldn't want anything with nickel in it, or I'd be killing myself.
That's it. So all you have to do, John, is find silver. Where are you? You're in Oregon? Is it Ohio?
Georgia.
So just find the nearest place to you that does fine silver, because you'll have jewelry makers buy fine silver. They will buy fine silver. They will smelt it, bulk it up with nickel or anything else, and make their rings and chains and whatnot out of it. So there are people who sell precious metals that sell silver. Buy yourself some bezel strips. They're called bezel strips, B-E-Z-E-L. Buy yourself whatever bezel strips you want. They'll be thin strips. These things are sold in spools, like wraps of wire, for silver for manufacturers to use, be it in jewelry or electrical wiring, whatever. So just buy yourself a foot or 2 feet, whatever, and make yourself these rods. The most important thing is that they don't touch when they're in the water, because they will arc, and when they arc, it doesn't do anything bad to the colloidal silver. But every single time they arc, the potency of your battery is basically acted as a capacitor and has discharged a lot of its energy very, very quickly. So you'll find that if you arc in the water, I've done it a million times by mistake. When it arcs, you get like that.
Does it actually spark you?
Yeah, no, it doesn't spark. It's in the water. You'll see a lightning rod between the two of them, a lightning strike between the two of them. You'll see an actual arc,
But it doesn't shock you?
No, not at all. But it arcs, and then it will take forever to make colloidal silver, But if you've got batteries that haven't arced, it will take half an hour to make you colloidal silver of like 30 parts per million or 40, which is you don't need more than that. If you look at the studies any of the studies that have been done, or the patent that I was talking about earlier, the quantities of colloidal silver that have been tested to kill the virus for the cold or the flu or Ebola, it's always like 2.3 parts per million or 0.6 parts per million that does the actual killing. So anything more than that, they're just working. The studies are to show what the minimum amount of colloidal silver. So they have to establish a range. So if it will kill Ebola at 0.6 parts per million, if you're having 12 parts per million, you've guaranteed that you're going to kill it, you know? And it does actually kill Ebola. It was used in the UK when we had an emergency situation in hospitals where there was an antibacterial resistant virus, bacteria, sorry, in the hospitals, on the furnitures, on the door handles, on the walls, and they couldn't get rid of it. And it went into kind of emergency situation, and eventually they got rid of it by buying silver products, colloidal silver. They sprayed everything with a colloidal silver. They spent £23 million with these silver.
It makes me feel like I need to get in touch with some of this stuff.
Well, just, I mean,
I'm not a sickly person. I'm not like a sickly person, but I still believe that, I should probably have.
Yeah, well, I'm urging everybody to make it yourselves. You can buy it, you know, but then if you're going to buy it, you want to also buy yourself a TDS meter, which is totally dissolved substance meter, because you might buy colloidal silver that says 20 parts per million on the bottle, but radiation would also give it that plus polarity. So if it will have received radiation, you know, by being transported by various different things, you know, the truck going by a base tower, telecommunications, and don't keep it anywhere near a microwave. In fact, don't ever use a microwave anyway. But it will become weaker over time.
Recently learned that.
Well, you know, another thing.
I don't use microwave anymore.
Yeah, I don't do that anymore either. But, you know, another thing that I learned about fairly recently is that most, or actually all plastics give off essentially poison. And so, you know, I just, a couple weeks ago, I bought like a 3-gallon jug of water for $1. I'm like, that's a pretty good deal. But when you realize it's been sitting in plastic for God knows how long, that stuff's probably toxic. And so when I went to the hospital the other day...
It tastes like poison when you drink it.
Yeah. When I went to the hospital yesterday, you know, any sort of saline bags they give you, that comes in plastic, and the shots are you know, the needles are plastic for your blood work. I mean, everything's in plastic. And, like, I could literally... They gave me, or they took a blood sample, and I could taste it in my lungs, like, instantly. It just tasted like plastic or poison or something.
Yeah, they got some kind of nasty chemical that's in the water from the plastic. It's disgusting.
Yeah. And so I would recommend to anybody, if you can, if you're going to do colloidal silver, you know, don't use plastic for sure. Use a glass and, you know, good sturdy stuff, and make sure you know what you're doing. But if you're using batteries, it's not like you're going to get electrocuted or anything.
Well, if I tell you my contraption, it's really simple and anybody can make it. Okay, I have a plastic lid because it's non-conductive, but this doesn't go into the water. Okay, and this plastic lid is larger than the top of the jar that I use for the water. So I have a glass jar that I fill with distilled water. I have this plastic lid which has 2 small slits through which I put the rods, and then I sit the batteries on top, you know, with the cables connected to each rod. They just sit on top. The outside of the battery is not going to do anything. It's not conductive. So, but if you worry, you can then have another lid, a plastic lid, anything plastic, okay? As long as this doesn't touch the water, it's perfectly safe. And when you're making the colloidal silver, one of the most important things to do is go to it every 10 minutes and gently and calmly grab the whole thing, grab the lid with the batteries and the rods, lift it slowly, completely out of the water, and then put it back in. Okay, what this does is as the silver is leaving the rods, there will be parts of the silver that are still attached to the rods, and you will get what look like barnacles, dark barnacles, okay? When you lift it out of the water, you'll see that these barnacles become part of the rod again. But whilst they're in the water, they're being pulled towards each other, so, or at least away from the rod. So lift it up out of the water and put it straight back in, okay? And it will carry on making the colloidal silver without giving you these barnacles that pull off. Because the barnacles, if you do this quickly, if you take it out of the water quickly, or if you stir them, try and mix them into the liquid, they won't mix. And those things, if you think for every small clump, you've got maybe a million parts per million in that small clump that will act as one single colloid. So that's waste, you know. So you want to pull it all out of the water, put it back in. Do that every 10 minutes. You'll have colloidal silver, and don't
That
keep it.
seems like a good idea because then you're recycling.
Yeah, yeah. And you want to not keep it in your fridge. You want to keep it in a glass jar. You don't have to heat it up. Some people say you have to heat it up. Just use distilled water.
Why don't you want to keep it in your fridge?
Because it will. The cold will also change its polarity. There's all kinds of strange stuff. Also, the fridge itself is like a miniature Faraday cage where
So
you have.
You want to keep it like warmer?
No, it's not the cold. It's not so much the cold.
Room temperature.
Yeah.
Don't mess with it.
Yeah, just keep it in anywhere. Don't keep it in the sunlight because that will basically irradiate it too and make it weaker. It will also make it turn a gold color, like beer kind of thing, or pee. But keep it in a cupboard. Just keep it in a cupboard in your kitchen. But keep it in a glass jar and drink. If you think you've got something like you do, John, drink it as quickly as you can. You know, like really, but spread it out throughout the day. Because if you drink, say you made yourself 2 liters and you drank 2 liters in one go, you would pee a lot of it out. It hasn't had chance to go into your bloodstream and just sit in your bloodstream. You want to spread it out so that it's going into your bloodstream.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'll probably do something like that. If I can ever get some money, I'll go get a silver ring and do a little experiment with it and see if it helps any. It's going to be a couple days after the weekend until my my lab test results come back. It's a specific test they do for that. And it's going to take some time. So I don't want to get too aggressive with the treatment until it's confirmed, but I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Sorry, John, there's also something else. There's a doctor called Dr. Merkler, and he has done studies and compiled studies for people using, because some people prefer to use antibiotics, and they've done studies with people using antibiotics and colloidal silver, and the colloidal silver helps the antibiotics work much faster. So it's kind of cool, you know? So, yeah. Even if you're given antibiotics and you take them, don't not take the colloidal silver because you think that it might kill the antibiotics. It won't. You know, it will help the antibiotics work.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, there's all kinds of studies. But the important thing is you don't do it with a silver ring. You do it with silver rods.
Well, you know, I wonder, I'm just sort of throwing this out here, but I wonder, because I've always sort of wondered how our white blood cells were able to, you know, latch on to foreign substances and kill them. Yeah. You know, our teachers tell us they're smart little hunter blood cells, but wouldn't it make more sense that maybe they were just some sort of a negative charge and that would attract them? Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's exactly that, yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. And in Spain and in Italy, I know this, I have Italian friends and know the same in Spain. Every kitchen had a silver spoon. Now, the silver spoon is, you know, sterling silver. It's not fine silver. You know, silver that has nickel and other alloys. So,
what's the difference?
Well, a fine silver.
You just want silver. You just want the silver in it. So if you can go even like a pawn shop, you can probably get a couple of pretty pure silver rings. Just don't get anything with any sort of jewels in it, I don't think. Just plain old couple silver rings, that should work, right?
Yeah, but you
Yeah, but
what
have you ever used silver spoons? Because it's pretty difficult to use, and you have to clean it all the time because it becomes black and stuff.
Yes. So what I was going to say is this: it's the imperative that you don't use anything that's been made into something. If it's been made into something, you can pretty much guarantee that it's not fine silver.
Oh,
So
okay.
buy yourself silver rods, basil strips. They're really cheap. Like they really are. For $7, you'd be able to buy your silver. There you go, and you've got silver strips. So buy yourself the silver strips. What I was saying about the spoon in Spain, like traditionally, people would have a silver spoon in the house, okay, in the kitchen. And this is because people would cook with field mushrooms, okay? So people go out in groups, they gather lots of mushrooms and they cook them. But from time to time, there will be a poison mushroom in there that can, really harm everybody in the house, everybody who's going to eat from this meal. So what they would do is, as they're cooking, you always have the person who knows about mushrooms, but from time to time you'd have somebody who wasn't.
Did you guys bring any magic flowers?
No. One second, let me just finish saying this. What they would do with a silver spoon is they would stir the mushroom stew. Okay, they would leave it in there. If the spoon went black, it meant that there was a poison mushroom. So if the spoon stayed clean, it's fine. If it goes black, throw everything away because it's a way of telling you that there's poison in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is in kind of traditional Hispanic home, so Latin.
Now, does that also apply for the colloidal silver? Like, if it starts turning black pretty quickly, that you might want to start a new batch or look at a new silver substance?
No. In fact, it will turn dark. It will turn a very dark grey whilst you're making the rods. When you finish making the colloidal silver, just wipe them down back to shiny, and there you go. You're ready for making the next batch.
Sweet, man, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's simple.
It's such a shame, though.
Really interesting.
Even though there is, from what you've said, there appears to be clinical evidence for this actually working well on patient populations, and it's a shame because the doctors out there are only allowed to prescribe what's on a list of approved drugs from the FDA.
Mm-hmm.
And even if that doctor knows of 10 better ways to treat whatever you're presenting with at the doctor. Even if he knows 10 different ways that aren't approved by the FDA or the USDA or the DEA or whatever, then they just can't tell you about it. Even if you ask them, they can tell you, well, I really can't tell you, but if you want my non-professional opinion, then they'll usually say something negative about it. And that could be anything from, supplemental products like milk thistle is a good example of something that I use a lot. It's just a natural herb, but it's got really good healing properties in terms of the liver, the GI tract. But if you ask a doctor, well, what about somebody mentioned milk thistle, and I've heard about milk thistle, and technically they can't tell you anything but something negative. They can say something negative like, oh, don't take it, but they could lose their license as a doctor if they said, well, you might want to try milk thistle for a couple weeks and see how you react to it, but it's just they can't do it because there's no money in a weed that grows out of the ground readily.
Yeah, we just have. I'm looking at chats. We have somebody called Termin who's saying, "What a dangerous thing to tell people." It's like, what? That you can make an antibiotic at home? Because that's what this colloidal silver is. So to this person, this dangerous thing to tell people. No.
I do remember reading some on the dangers of it, and I don't remember what that was. It didn't turn me off from it, but there was a time a couple of years ago when I was just looking into sort of holistic or herbal remedies, just because the doctors out there, a lot of times they don't have anything that really is good for you and works. They're obviously good at treating symptoms. In some cases, they're good at treating the cause of whatever your issue is. But 9 times out of 10, they're just trying to get the symptom rid of, don't care about the underlying problem, and keep you coming back. I mean, unfortunate as it is, that's about what we've got here. And but I'd love to see hospitals testing it at least, because they could test it, clinically. to much better levels than I could, or
Well,
any of us could, I reckon.
Yeah, they have done. The University of Manchester here in the UK tested it. The professor of biochemistry, and she published a paper. She was in one of the broadsheets here in the UK, explaining it all. If you give me 5 minutes, what I'll do is I will go and bring my colloidal silver kit, and I'll make some whilst we're chatting. I'll leave it here to make whilst we're talking.
Yeah, if you want to do that, that'd be cool.
Yeah, it would take me 5 minutes, but this is, I forget the name of the professor. She's a professor of biochemistry at Manchester University. She did the study, and she was interviewed by the reporter who was writing the article into how the National Health Service got rid of this antibiotic-resistant bacteria called MRSA. If anybody wants to look it up. So she was quoted there. I wanted to interview her. I didn't, because basically it's like, I should be pretty to the buyer. But anybody who wants to pull up that newspaper, it's the Daily Mail. Pull it up, have a good read, and if you want to, check any of the links or.
Now, is that stuff pretty easy to make?
Yeah, I'm gonna make some right now. I'm gonna go and make some. I'm gonna go and bring it and make it in front of. Okay?
But it's pretty simple to make.
Yeah, you'll see, because I'm gonna make it now. Give me 5 minutes, I'll bring it. Okay?
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
More or less, you got a single jar. You've got some kind of a lid on top that's got a couple holes in it, a couple pretty good size holes. And then you're going to stick the 2 strips into those 2 holes and either clamp them or tape them down so they're hanging well into the water. And you give each, well, I'm not sure how he does the charges, so I don't want to misspeak, but you give each a charge, and the 2 nearby strips are going to want to connect. And so that's the colloidal silver that goes into the water, is that final connection in between the 2 pieces of metal. Right, but he'll show you. It shouldn't be. It's a pretty easy thing from what I heard. I've never tried it though, so I mean I'm definitely willing to try new things. One thing I would be concerned about is silver's a pretty heavy metal, and I just wonder if it would if it would get backed up in the liver. Would there be issues with that? Or he said if you urinate it out, then that's typically not going through your liver. If I've got that right, maybe I'm wrong. Anyway,
I don't know,
I never
man.
really thought about that as far as it being filtered out.
People have been suggesting me to do colloidal silver and also some other things for many years now already, and I never did anything. I never took any supplements. The only thing I do is for the last 3 or maybe it's already 4 years, I only drink the distilled water, or 90% of what I drink is distilled water, and I have never been sick in the last 4 years. I feel perfect all the time.
Did you have to switch over or to drinking nothing but distilled?
No, not really. I just started to do it. One day I bought a machine to distill water, and I drank it pretty much all the time because it tasted good. I liked it. I still drink other stuff, but just most of the time it's always distilled water. If I make coffee, I drink coffee. I make it with distilled water. I don't know.
I've known people.
Maybe that's the working ingredient in colloidal silver, because I never knew that they also use distilled water to do it.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, interesting. I think it's worth testing, and it would be pretty easy. I mean, if there's one hospital that's done it, that's great, or university hospital. But I'd like to see if it is working as well as people are claiming. I'd like to see widespread testing done, but it's not like any mainstream medical center is going to actually do that with this, with such a treatment, because if it's not a pill, then it can't be a cure, according to the doctor paradigm.
True. It's difficult to test things like that. Yeah. When I told my doctor around 3 years ago that I was drinking distilled water, she was saying that it was a bad idea and I was probably going to get very sick doing it, but I never got any problems. I asked her why and she could not say why, so,
Your doctor told you not to drink distilled water?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
No,
that's
I
just
heard
ridiculous.
this dude I used to work with many, many years ago. He drank nothing but distilled water all day long, and we'd bring a couple of packs of because we were working outside in the heat. We'd bring a couple packs of waters and put them in the cooler. But he always would tell us, "Don't drink mine." He's like, "I'm not being greedy, but if you start drinking distilled water, it can make you sick. You have to, I guess, wean into it. You know,
Acclimatize yourself to it.
yeah, yeah, basically like slow, like drink just a little bit at first, and then switch over. Because I guess it's from what I gather, it's that switch over. But I hardly drink enough water as it is, so if as long as I'm drinking something, I'm good. With
What
water.
convinces me most that it's good for you is that when you use a water distiller and you look at all the dirt that comes out of the water, it's pretty insane. If you use tap water, you get an amount of dirt on 10, every 10 liters you need to clean it and make it empty again. It's insane the amount of dirt that is in the water. So
So
it
Yes.
feels right to
a
me.
constant thing.
Comes out looking like just black sludge.
Yep. Sometimes it's even reddish if you use tap water.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't, but again, what's the alternative though is like spring water or bottled water. And here, I don't know about where y'all live, but that always comes in a plastic bottle. And again, there's issues with drinking out of plastic, storing stuff that you're going to drink in plastic.
And for me, the biggest problem is that most of the bottled water here comes also with fluoride. And I don't want that crap anymore.
Fluoride, oh man.
Yeah, most of them, yeah.
Wow. Well, guys, what I'm probably going to do this week, because I am not 100% here, and unless anybody had any topics that they wanted to go over, I was going to go ahead and wrap this show up just a wee bit early today, unless anybody had any important announcements, plugs, or anything that you want to make before we go.
No, not really. That's fine for me. It was fun, and I have to go soon also, so...
Okay.
Yeah. And GeoShifter, if you want to check out, if you're interested in poetry, that's
I
basically
already
what my
subscribed.
website is. Poetry. So if you like that, go check that out. And other than
Your
that, yeah,
YouTube
it's
channel?
been good talking with you guys.
Yeah. I already subscribed to your YouTube channel. I will check out your videos.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, RoboShark, GeoShifter, Antonio. Antonio, it was a pleasure having you, man. Did you have anything, final words before we go?
Well, I think Antonio is still trying to find his
He's taking
silver
it down.
stuff.
We'll let him. Yeah, we'll let him come back then. That's right. We'll let him come back so he can do his thing with that, because I'm sure there's people that want to see how he did that. So at least I got the pre-wrap up out of the way, and we even had Martin Ledke on for a little while, and it's funny because I was actually just thinking about him yesterday, and so he popped in for just a minute, and so thank you for Martin Ledke as well. And until we get,
I'll say one more time, thank you for inviting me to the show, John.
Oh yeah, man, it's good having you. I appreciate you hanging out with us. And until Antonio comes back, we'll give him a couple more minutes and see if he's able to make it back. Oh yeah, he made it.
I'm just about ready. 20 seconds more and I'll be straight back.
Okay.
Hey, Morgile, did you watch the Juno mission?
The Juno mission?
Yep, the mission to Jupiter from NASA.
I hadn't seen anything on it yet. I think I saw something about it.
Oh, it was pretty cool to see. It was all animations again, of course. But
Which one are you talking about, Gio?
the latest one, the one that goes to Jupiter or arrived at Jupiter. It has been traveling for 5
I'll have
years.
to check that out.
Well, it looks like a ceiling fan.
I have to check that out.
I wonder if if the mission is aborted or if anything bad happened, because it seems that Chef Stewart made a video that something went wrong, but I can't find anything on it. I don't know. Maybe I need to watch Chef Stewart's video because I only read the title. I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one, but yeah, I definitely want to check out what NASA's lies are about Jupiter, because we allegedly sent a space probe to Jupiter back in 1972. I want to say it was the Pioneer. So does anybody know what the alleged differences are between this and Pioneer?
Not much, no.
Okay. I mean, obviously.
The best thing is the two pictures, because Russian Vids found out that there are two pictures. They made a recent picture now from Jupiter, like a few weeks ago, and he compared it to a picture that is over 2 years old, and it's pretty much exactly the same. The only thing they changed is at the pole, at the north pole of the Jupiter, or the top, they added auroras. But all the clouds, everything exactly the same. So it's the same picture. Or the clouds didn't move for 2 years. That's possible also.
Oh man, yeah, I saw a pretty good video where somebody must have spent a lot of time, either that or they did some sort of image referencing to find NASA was using 100% duplicate images for like the sun, right? And they'd spread it out so it'd be like 6 months apart or years apart so that people wouldn't notice. But I guess what they've done is, I wish I knew the channel name, but I don't. I guess what they did is they just started categorizing, you know, you can get software that'll allow you to categorize pictures by the image impression, I guess is a term for it. And that impression is, they basically put certain signatures into the coding that's in the picture itself, so that when that image is pulled up or uploaded onto, say, YouTube, it could be, you know, copyrighted or identified that way, or at least identified as a duplicate image, right, just by the image itself. So if that's what they're doing, and just giving us fake pictures on, you know, certain days, I mean, it's really low, but you know, I'm sure they're doing something like that. Okay, so Antonio, looks like you got your colloidal silver thing set up there.
Yeah, I'll just pull it out, show everybody. I have the two silver strips, okay, and I have 9-volt batteries in series. So this is distilled water in here. I took a reading just before putting the rods in. Can anybody see that? It's the right way up. It should read 001. So that's 0.1 is, this means 1 part per million. So whatever is in this distilled water is 1 part per million. I have the silver here. As I do the reading, anything that increases on this sensor will be silver. So that's how you determine the parts per million of silver. So we're starting with 1 part per million that's already in the distilled water. The glass, you want to use, ideally, borosilicate glass. But don't be pedantic about this. As long as you use glass that isn't going to burst on the heat, you'll be fine. What I use is, when you buy a ready-made sauce or jam, the best kind of jam is the best kind of jar is the type that jam, or in the US, jelly, it comes in when you buy it, because jelly is really hot when it's made. You know, that glass is borosilicate. It's the kind of glass that can withstand very hot temperatures without bursting. Very strong glass. So this glass is actually a coffee jar. This is not one of those borosilicate. So I'm showing you that you don't have to use, you know, a very specific type of glass. And that's it. I leave this. It starts making colloidal silver. In about 10 minutes, I'll stop it, and it will have enough colloidal silver that I can start ingesting it and get rid of anything that might be lurking. So, but we don't have to, John. If you want to wrap up before then, it's fine. I just wanted to show people the configuration.
Oh,
this is
no.
all.
I did a quick pre-wrap up so that when you got back, we could wrap you up and then we'd be done, because I just feel like crap. Just to be honest. So I'm gonna wrap this one up early. I don't know how much that you were able to hear, but real quick before we go, Antonio, did you have any final thoughts, any videos or work that you're doing that you want to plug?
Yeah, I want to plug this little fact. I don't know who's seen my lightsaber video, which is a bunch of observatories in Mauna Kea shooting lasers up at stars, you know, at whatever is above us. And I've got a copyright strike from that, so I'm contesting it. So no long videos, no hangouts from me for the next 10 days. If they if they stick to it, then I will open another channel for the next 6 months. But if not, I'll be back doing the Hangouts and longer videos and whatnot. So yeah,
you can still join a Hangout with the copyright strikes. You just can't host them, which is it's a big pain. But as long those copyright strikes, man, as long as you the fair use laws are pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of looking at this content under new sort of circumstances or a fresh look at the content, and if you argue it that way, there's really no argument that the copyright owner can put. Now, you won't be able to monetize that video, but at least they'll get rid of the strike, because that's such a pain.
Yeah, well, I've looked at the fair use things. Yeah, the guy's just put the complaint. He doesn't have any grounds for it. I have given it a different well, I haven't just lifted it. I am giving it a critique. It is saying something other than what his original footage was saying, and his footage is factual. So on those two grounds, he doesn't have any reason for a copyright. I think what it is more than anything is that his email is Geeky Rocket Guy. So he's probably come across my thing, Flat Earth Lightsabers, and thought, I'm going to be fucked if I'm going to let a flat earther use my video. That's what's happened, But
yeah,
so be it. And anyway, it's just 6 months. I'll open another channel and do Hangouts, because my next Hangout was going to be on health. Now, the reason I say this is some people would think, oh, hold on, health, you're not a doctor. Maybe we should start thinking about health like we're thinking about science. We're not scientists either, not accredited with diplomas and degrees, but we can engage with science just like any other human being, and we can engage with medicine just like any other human being. This is part of the big structure of control. If you're not part of the American Medical Association or the British Medical Association, that's just bullshit. That's just how they get away with keeping things like colloidal silver out of the market, or cannabis, THC, out of the market. We don't have to yield, to acquiesce to these things. We can talk about health as much as we want.
Oh, absolutely. And, I think I mentioned earlier on in the show that hospitals are very well equipped to track, outcomes in terms of any treatment. And what I mentioned earlier is they're set up for that. That's what they do. They've got systems in place for easy blood work to see what's going on in the blood if you do that. So, I mean, ideally, you definitely want to carry out health clinical trials in some kind of a healthcare setting. As much as we all hate the big pharmaceutical companies, and a lot of the doctors can be kind of jerks. Most doctors are really decent people that want to help people, but they have a very stressful life. Those doctors do, and so I don't know. It just seems like at what point does each one of your hundreds and hundreds of patients, how important are they compared to you and your family as a doctor? And some people are able to put themselves in lots and lots of different people's shoes all day, and that's just that's a tough job. And I think that a lot of doctors just sort of take a shortcut. They sever that humane bond between us. A lot of doctors tend to put themselves on a higher platform, and so wouldn't necessarily give you or I the same treatment that they would their own daughter, right? Yeah. Because he's not treating his daughter in a professional environment, but he could try some things that he knows that may not be aligned exactly to the USDA, and there's nothing they can do. And that's a shame. I think doctors should be able to freely try different cures, especially if there's evidence for it that it works. And what kind of world will we have, if we continue allowing these, it's mainly the big pharma companies to run our healthcare systems. It's just, it's ridiculous. It's upside down.
It is upside down. And, we were talking earlier about the products. There are eye drops that you can get for babies that might have eye problems. And these eye drops, if you look at the contents, they have aqua, which is basically water in a kind of jellious form, and silver nanoparticles. This is what it tells you on the box. This is colloidal silver for babies. Okay, and here in the UK you can buy plasters, you know, for when you've cut a band-aid, for when you have a cut, have silver in the lining. Okay, so
wow.
yeah, they know about silver. It's just they can't really make so much money out. Well, they prefer to use money out of pharmaceuticals that are basically derived from petroleum, because that's what most pills are made of. Petroleum is just stretched out from what they do basically for making medication is they take petroleum, you know, from the ground. They plasticize it. They then remold those plastics into structures that they then compile together, a bit like freaking Lego, and they make you a pill, and they call it Prozac or various different things. That's basically what they do. That's how pharmaceuticals are made, and the source is petroleum. So it's the same people that run the petrol world that run the pharmaceutical industry. So they don't want things that people can make at home. You know, we haven't got centrifuges and all the kind of equipment to make medications at home, but we can eat healthy and we can study and learn, and the things that we can make, you know, make them. Like, people will call this alchemy. No, this is just freaking making a silver solution. I'll show you just before we wrap up, John. I'll just show whatever the reading is now.
Sure. Yeah.
So let's see. So the reading on this now is, let me see if you can see. Can you see the reading?
Nah, it's not coming out. Read it off.
It says 5.
Oh, 5. Yeah. So that was wow. That wasn't long at all. Yeah.
No. So another 10 minutes, and it would be around 15, 20 parts per million. Like 10 parts per million is totally fine. If you make up over that, over time it will degrade down to 10 parts per million. But this will be consumed in the next couple of days by me. And that's it. This is as simple as it gets. And to buy this amount of colloidal silver from a colloidal silver manufacturer, you'd be paying $100 more. And it's costing me, what, about 70 cents, if that's including the battery cost. So it's nothing.
Sweet, man. That's awesome. Well, and as much as I hate to, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up now, guys. We got almost 2.5 hours, over 2.5 hours in, so we're almost there anyways. I just got some things I got to do, and I'm not feeling all that great, just being brutally honest with you guys. So really, I appreciate all y'all for coming. It was great having you. We'll be back Wednesday at 8 Eastern, and be on the lookout for some new videos. So y'all have a good weekend, and I'll talk with y'all Wednesday or maybe sooner.
Yeah.
Go rest, man. Big thanks.
Yeah,
Yes.
I am.
Rest well. Jump in the bath with some sodium bicarbonate if you can. Just soak in there. Let it detoxify you.
Yeah, I've actually got some. No, I won't drown. I think I'm gonna make it.
You will.
I hope so. We will see next episode.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hey man, y'all be good or be good at it. And for everyone else out there, thanks so much for joining us tonight. This was season 2, episode 2 of Static Plain Truth, Saturday edition. So thank y'all for coming. And as always, spread the word, and peace.